I've always wondered if the people who have done great things in history ever thought they would do those things when they were kids. Like, did Abraham Lincoln grow up thinking he would free the slaves? Did Michael Phelps always think he would win all those Olympic medals? Did Neil Armstrong think he would ever walk on the moon? Or did Bill Gates and Steve Jobs think they would grow up and change the technological culture forever? And when did they figure it out? I mean, when did their story begin to unfold into a bigger story than they ever had dreamed possible? See, that's the deal with extraordinary people. They do extraordinary things, obviously, but they all seem to start out as ordinary people first. And you know what else? Most of the extraordinary events often started out by a simple twist or a turn at an ordinary event or place or time that eventually led to everything being changed. That's how the story of Esther begins. A simple party is being thrown by the king. And I need to give you one quick side note as we begin this study. Some of your Bible translations are going to call the king by his name Ahasuerus. And some are going to say King Xerxes. And we actually use both of those names in the Bible. They're the same guy. Ahasuerus was the name that he was given, but the Greeks often referred to him as Xerxes. So either is fine, and we're going to use both in the book. Now back to our regularly scheduled program. The king, whatever his name is throwing a party. And it's a party that's probably not all that different from hundreds of parties the king has thrown before. It's ordinary. Esther doesn't even know the king and queen, and she's certainly never been on their invite list. And any of their parties, she's just not there. Yet this one party will change everything that was ever ordinary about Esther's life. See, there's a bigger story coming in Esther's future. These opening events in the book of Esther will actually be the setting of a bigger story that's at play that nobody knew about. See, Esther chapter 1 seems to be a simple story about a marital spat between the king Xerxes and his wife Queen Vashti. To the average person, it's just a story. It's a story about a royal family and an overly sensitive king kicking his wife out of the kingdom, to be honest, because he got his ego bruised a little bit. But there's more coming. This story is just the beginning. In fact, there's going to be a rescue that saves the lives of an entire nation of people coming before this story is over. And it all begins with Queen Vashti being sent away from the king and the decision to find another queen. Chapter 2 is where Esther starts this journey towards becoming the queen. Esther. You wonder, did she ever think she might be queen when she was growing up? And at what point did this start to become real to her? I mean, was it when Esther was taken to the king's palace where all the other potential future royalty were? And do you think she even thought she had a chance? Did she even want to be queen? And when the king liked her right off the bat and gave her anything she needed and women to attend to her beauty regimen, did it start to get more real? When she invested an entire year of her life focused solely on her beauty, did she start to want it a little bit more? Did Esther start to dream of what it could be like to be queen? And eventually she finds favor with the king, and Esther, the young Jewish woman from Susa, became Queen Esther. A dream come true. And yet, this is actually small potatoes to what's coming. See, while being Queen Esther seems like a dream come true to most of the world, God has plans for Esther that go well beyond worldly acclaim, fame, and fortune. Esther is part of a bigger story that God is writing that no one else knows is coming. Can I tell you that God often works like that? God seems to have always worked like that. He takes some of the least likely people and he puts them in some of these least expected situations, and then he uses some of the least likely ways to change the course of history. So as we begin this 7-week journey through the story of Esther, there are just two things I want to point out and one challenge I want to give you as we begin. Number one, God has always been, he is, and he will always be writing a bigger story. The story that is over all of our little earthly stories that are going on. And number two, nobody's story is boring or ordinary once it's given over to God. He has always something more in store. And he always can use things that seem small and insignificant for great and powerful purposes. And now the challenge. Would you commit during this next 7 weeks to think about and to ask God how he may want to use you and the situation and the place and the circumstance that you find yourself in to do something great for his glory? Who knows, what you see as something that's maybe just ordinary might be extraordinary in the hands of God. He might be writing a life-changing story right now in your everyday story of life. Would you take the next 7 weeks as we dive into Esther and open yourself to the idea that God's writing something in you? Would you ask him what it is? And would you commit to live it out for him?